Behind the Scenes. I am your host, Hector Montalvo. Joining us here today at our MCTV studios, we're honored to be sitting with two fine attorneys, Richard Consoli and Krista Susan, correct?
Correct.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, people are facing tough times these days. Tough economy, not everyone can afford an attorney. We understand that you do pro bono work. Tell us, what is pro bono?
Well, pro bono involves an attorney providing assistance at no cost to the client or at a reduced fee, or making some arrangement, but typically it involves either no cost or very low cost.
No cost or very little cost. Now, I noticed that you guys are both involved in the court system heavily, and obviously you're an attorney, so you have business at the... But what I find is that most people that can't afford an attorney go in and ask for advice or to be help out with paperwork and so on, but they still get charged for the attorney's time. You, on the other hand, are in the courts helping individuals, and they're not paying you for that. How do you do that, and why do you do that?
Well, I think I do it because lawyers, as a profession, have an obligation to provide free legal services as part of their obligation to the profession and also to the judicial system and to the people that they serve. I do it because I, first of all, feel an obligation. I come from an immigrant family and I grew up in Lawrence. And so I'm quite familiar with the people that I serve because they're of another generation. Their accents might be slightly different than my father's Italian accent or my mother's French, but the problems that they have, the concerns that they have, the seriousness of the problems that they have really hasn't changed. And it's an obligation, I think, that I have to pay back. And because I've been blessed, I mean, I had the opportunity of being able to get an education. I'm the first person in my family ever to graduate from anything. And I can relate to the kinds of problems that they have. And if we're going to be a civilized society, we have, as individuals and as members of the human race, and certainly as lawyers, an obligation to see that everyone gets their fair share of justice, and that justice is not simply available to those that can afford to buy it or pay for it. And the kinds of problems that we see in the court with the people that come in are very serious problems. They involve failed relationships, failed marriages. More often than not, their children are at the center of the controversy. So I view the role of volunteer lawyers in the court system, we're really in the life-saving business. And more often than not, we may not necessarily see the people that we are really serving, it's the children. But ultimately, that's our objective, to make certain that the children that are at the center of controversy are kept safe out of harm's way, and that their parents, as well as the community, as well as the judicial system, act and serve their best interests.
Now, Krista, let me ask you. A woman wants to get divorced. She wants to file paperwork. She doesn't know how to do it. A man wants to file divorce, wants to file the paperwork, don't know how to do it. That's where you come in. What type of help do you provide them as far as paperwork, information? What type of information do people get when they come see you?
Well, they can come to a program that actually Attorney Consoli runs in the Lawrence session of the Essex County Probate Court, and it's called Lawyer for the Day. And he runs an extensive program there where there's an attorney available, a free attorney, to help fill out paperwork and give advice, usually every day, if not the entire day, either the 9 to 1 or the 1 to 4 shift. And as I said, they're there to help fill out the paperwork and give advice, man, woman, whoever, and they have to income qualify, though. They're for low-income individuals. But on occasion, when there is time available, an attorney will take time to talk to somebody who doesn't necessarily fit the profile of the income qualifications. And Dick may be able to talk a little bit more about the details of that program. It's a widespread program. It's also available in Salem, and I'm sure it's available in Suffolk County as well. I know it's available in Middlesex County as well, and I believe it's run by the Essex County Bar Association. And they are volunteer attorneys that volunteer their time, and Dick himself is there 2 days a week, and there are other attorneys that are there 1 to 3 days a week, a couple of times a month.
Now, you mentioned you do it for free, and there's more attorneys involved in this. How many attorneys in total can people expect throughout? You mentioned Suffolk County, Middlesex County, Essex County. How many attorneys are out there that are doing this type of work?
Well, the program that I coordinate at the moment has 17 volunteer attorneys that actively, on an ongoing basis, are involved in the program. Every lawyer has an obligation to provide free legal assistance. The question really is, does every lawyer? And I would have to honestly say that there are many lawyers that do, probably most, but clearly there are lawyers that avoid that responsibility. And it's unfortunate because there is a need. We certainly have a greater unmet need for lack of support, lack of participation on the part of all of the legal community.
Now, you mentioned that the attorneys, the pro bono attorneys, work for either the Essex County Family Probate Court, either in Lawrence, Salem. Mm-hmm. The criminal system side of the system has attorneys that are appointed to them. In most cases, for indigency people that can't afford to hire an attorney, they pay a cost of maybe $150 at time of arraignment, as we have seen in the courts. In the civil side, they don't get appointed an attorney. Why is that?
Well, I think it's a matter of cost, a view that individuals that are involved in criminal charges have greater need and greater seriousness, and it's probably true. But certainly, when you're dealing with failed relationships or failed marriages, and there are children involved, the consequences of the judicial system failing to provide all that is necessary has consequences that play out in the lives not only of the parents, the husband, the wife, but more importantly in the lives of the children that are involved, and the implications, the consequences can carry on for a lifetime. The injury, emotional, and psychological injury that's done to the child, they more often not carry with them into adulthood, many times not even recognizing the fact that they've been injured. And it plays out in their inability to be able to have satisfactory relationships themselves. But more often than not, if you start poking around and you start asking the individuals that come in, the parents that come in, about their family life, the family background of the other party, more often than not, they themselves are the children of failed relationships, or didn't know who their father was, or they were abandoned by both mother and father, and raised by some other family member. But it's not as though there aren't consequences, and the consequences aren't simply don't always just affect the immediate circle, but they affect the neighborhood, the community, because that dysfunction carries on and it manifests itself in a variety of ways, and we all are affected by it. And we have an obligation to our children to make sure that doesn't happen.
Now, family probate court deals with equity, basically an equity court. What are some of the other things that you do help out? So if, in other words, does child support, do you help individuals with child support questions or filling out complaints for modification, a complaint to obtain child support? I know that there is a child support office up there as well. Why can't they do it versus an attorney?
They could go to the Department of Revenue and file a complaint to establish support or to modify support or terminate support. But oftentimes that takes a long time to get through the process. DOR, they have several hundreds, if not thousands, of child support cases. Sometimes getting it through, hiring a private attorney to take your case or getting an attorney to take a pro bono might get the case worked through the system a little bit quicker. And the attorneys that work within the Department of Revenue work for the Department of Revenue. So their main objective is to obtain a child support order so that the state isn't paying welfare to the mom of the child or the father of the child. They don't necessarily work for you if you're going in to file a complaint for modification or a complaint for child support. So sometimes, depending on the complicatedness of the case, you may want to hire an outside private attorney.
So people can go in, and if they want to file for a divorce, they can file for divorce, and you guys would help them. If they need help in obtaining a child support order as well, or modifying their child support order, you guys help them as well. What about for those people that want adoption or are looking to do adoption? Do you help them out in that aspect as well, and what does that consist of?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we will assist people who come into the probate and family court for a matter involving the probate of an estate, a guardianship, an adoption, for any one of a number of, obviously for divorces, paternities, contempts, and the like. Any topic or any matter that would be held or dealt with in the probate and family court, we would try to assist. But the challenge is that more often than not, they need an attorney to effectively to work with them and walk them through the process. And despite our good intentions, they need more than we're able to provide. It isn't enough simply to give them some advice. It isn't enough simply to help them to complete forms. But if they're going to get all that they're entitled to, all that they will need for themselves, for their children and the like, they're going to need to have an attorney that's going to be able to spend the time to work with them, to do additional pleadings, and to represent them in the court itself. Because otherwise, yes, they'll come out of the courthouse with a divorce. They'll get a child support order and a custody visitation and the like. But if they're going to continue to be effective as parents, they ought to have a parenting plan or a well-drafted divorce agreement that effectively serves as a rule book to regulate their relationship with one another and the children, and describes their respective rights and responsibilities. And despite our best effort, we just don't have the capacity or the time to be able to do that in the 15 minutes or 30 minutes that they have with them. And the challenge really is, and Krista can address that, the challenge is to be able to find them legal representation that can work them through the process, and that representation may continue for weeks, for months. But in order to make certain that when they walk out of that courthouse on the last day, that they've received the same opportunities, the same treatment that they would otherwise have received had they been willing to pay an attorney full fee. That there ought not to be a distinction where, again, those that can afford it get their full fair share of justice, and those that can't sort of get the Walmart version of what the judicial system has to offer.
Now, you mentioned it's sponsored by the Bar Association, so it's sort of like a legal aid type of service that most communities have in their communities?
Yeah, the program in Salem and in Lawrence is sponsored by the Essex Bar Association. And what they do is they provide the volunteer attorneys with training material. So part of what I do is to recruit attorneys to staff the program, to provide them with training as well, so that they're fully prepared to be able to adequately provide advice. I gather the statistics from month to month of the number of people we've seen, the various categories and provide that to the Essex Bar, and effectively they use it to obtain the grant money that is used to provide the attorneys with training and training material.
Now, when most divorces can turn ugly, in just by saying I want a divorce or anything like that, it can turn ugly, and we find that there are restraining orders that people can obtain to either stop and ask the court to order someone to stop abusing them, to stay away from their home, and so on. And you can attach kids into that restraining order. Mm-hmm. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts also has what's called a harassment restraining order, which it's different from the domestic relations, because the domestic relations you have to have been married, live together, or have some type of relationship, where in the harassment side, you don't have to have that relationship, just three times, 3 different dates of offenses. In civil court, they come in and get a restraining order, and children are involved in that restraining order. I understand that the Commonwealth issues about 25 to 30,000 restraining orders each year. Today being March, up to date, the district court has issued 222 restraining orders, and the probate side of the court system has issued 10 restraining orders. And that's a low number coming from the probate side. How do you and their children are involved in there? Is there anything that you do to help individuals obtain a restraining order to protect themselves, their children as well, or can they just go to the criminal side of the court and they will handle those on that end? How do you work with those aspects? Do you do restraining order issues as well?
Yeah, we assist in restraining orders. The advice that we give would be that if it's a matter that will also involve visitation, custody, and the like, that they ought to obtain the restraining order out of the probate court as opposed to district.
If there was kids involved.
If there are children involved, right. But we will assist in preparing the restraining order. And there are other organizations that will provide support. And Krista, you can address that.
The Merrimack Valley Legal Services, Neighborhood Legal Services are 2 local programs that are funded by legal aid, but that legal aid is actually, every attorney that practices has to have an IOLTA account. And it's an interest-bearing account that client funds is kept in. The interest earned on those accounts is then funneled into legal aid organizations, much like Merrimack Valley Legal Services and Neighborhood Legal Services. My understanding is that their conditions is that there has to be an active restraining order present in order for them to take on a case. But they will take a pro bono case from A to Z, a divorce. There are several attorneys that will also volunteer their time pro bono through those organizations. Both of those organizations offer, sometimes twice a year, a family law seminar that attorneys can attend. They also offer bankruptcy and Social Security appeal seminars that attorneys attend. And in exchange for attending the seminar and obtaining the educational materials, you are committed to taking at least 2 pro bono cases. So that's how those organizations are able to get attorneys to volunteer their time. and be able to get attorneys to cover the pro bono cases.
What about if someone couldn't afford an attorney and they needed to see an attorney for pro bono information, such as help in paperwork, and they don't speak any English or anything? Do you have different attorneys that speak different languages and so on?
Yeah, typically in the Lawyer for the Day program, we've been very fortunate. We typically will have 2 or 3 or more attorneys that staff the program that are either bilingual or will bring bilingual staff with them in order to ensure that people who are not comfortable in English get an opportunity to be able to adequately get their story out and correspondingly to get adequate assistance or representation. And the court also, we would, as an example, make arrangements for a Spanish interpreter to be available to them on the day that they go into the court. We also will refer clients to various organizations. Merrimack Valley Legal Services, as the Massachusetts Bar Association has a volunteer lawyer program. The Boston Bar Association does as well. So in addition to whatever services we're providing, we're also trying to find them an attorney that will represent them on an ongoing basis. And it's not unusual for the 16 or 17 lawyers that staff the program to take on cases, to take cases back to their office, so that in addition to the volunteer work that they do at the courthouse, they will also have individuals that they will represent for no fee.
Now, you mentioned the divorce and so on, everything related to family and probate court, divorces, child support, custody, adoption. Excuse me. Let me ask you this. Is divorce a contract in general terms?
It is a contract, but it is governed, not governed exclusively by contract law because of the nature or the differences between the relationship. In a contract, you have 2 or more individuals. It's an arm's length transaction, which each party assumed to be fully informed and essentially looking out for themselves. There's a Latin term, caveat emptor, which essentially says, listen, everyone sort of takes care of themselves. In a marriage, there are obviously obligations, contractual obligations, but the system has to modify or soften it because the individuals that are involved in that marriage have been in a relationship with one another, and many times you've got children involved that don't have a direct voice. You will have parties to a marriage who are really not capable of adequately representing themselves. And the object is to temper contract law, which can be very straightforward but brittle, to take contract law and to it soften it. And that softening is we describe as the court system being a court of equity. Equity being viewed as fairness, that what we're trying to do is to resolve issues fairly and reasonably for the benefit of the parties as well as for others that are affected. So as a consequence of that, it isn't as harsh as it might otherwise be if this was strictly a business relationship.
Now, we see in the court system, and we constantly report about the court system in this program, we see in the court system that the use of restraining orders are a tool to prevent someone from keeping their children away, maybe retaliation because of the divorce filing, the child support situation, the whole 9 yards. There is a big abuse within the system in general. I want to ask you, in general speaking, do you see this type of abuse going on? Because restraining orders are funded by taxpayer dollars. And, when someone abuses the system, there is no accountability for them abusing that particular system. And we see that restraining orders are mainly abused to hurt someone, hurt a child, hurt yourself, or hurt someone in general to keep you away from your children. Because marriage is not a written contract, and you have other people may have contracts in general that they spell out their whole intent. Does marriage contract work different if it's in writing versus not in writing? So when you're going through divorce, there's not this process, okay, I'm going to take out a restraining order against you, I'm going to take you to child support. Do you see any type of abuse in just that system alone?
Yeah, coincidentally, I'm also an adjunct professor of law at Massachusetts School of Law. And my students on last Tuesday had an examination, a mid-term examination on that very topic, which is prenuptials, antenuptial agreements, agreements that parties will enter into in advance of marrying. And essentially what it's intended to do is to address all of the issues, and in advance of being married and in anticipation that the marriage may fail, try to settle matters between them while they're presumably acting in good faith and getting along with one another. And it will address issues involving division of marital assets, division of marital debt, issues of alimony, health insurance, and the like. The standard is that the agreement has to be fair and reasonable at the time of the signing of the agreement. It requires that there be full disclosure, so both parties know what the other party owns, earns, and the like. It cannot control issues involving child custody, child support. That's left to the court. It has to be fair and reasonable at the time of implementation, at the time of the failed marriage, when they're looking to this agreement in order to settle matters. And in a circumstance where one of the parties would be effectively stripped of most of the assets and would effectively end up on welfare, despite what might have previously been agreed to, the court would step in order to avoid that person going on welfare. But essentially, to a large degree, it's contract. But again, like other matters in the probate and family court, it also involves matters of equity, fairness.
Well, I'd like to tell you that, there's so much that we can discuss here. We'd like to invite you to come back on a future date to carry on the further discussion. Really quickly, how do people that seek help, how do they reach out to your offices? How do they get a hold of you, if 30 seconds or less?
If they want to reach our office, we're at 30 Massachusetts Avenue in North Andover, in what was formerly the Lawrence Savings Bank building, and then the Riverbank, and most recently People's United Bank. Our telephone number is 978-682-9643, and if they are in the courthouse, if they go to the Registry of Probate office, we're there. If they want to check in advance to confirm that we are in fact scheduled for a particular day, they can call the court and get our schedule as well.
Great. I appreciate both of you coming in to having this discussion with us here at our MCTV studios. Really quickly, term limits on relationship and marriages. Does that sound like a good idea or a bad idea?
Term limits? Relationships and marriages ought to be for a lifetime, and when they're not, there's